Well, here we are, all stuck in our own houses in the lockdown, but we're having a ceilidh. Hello, my name's Tim Porteous, and I'm speaking for the wee town of Prestonpans. And in thinking about what story to tell for this ceilidh, I was sitting in my wee garden. I'm lucky to have a wee garden, and I was thinking about how I'm really missing the places that I like to go and visit. And although I'm for the lowlands, of course, like many people, my heart is in the Highlands, and the landscape and the stories and the traditions from there are very much part of things I love. And so I thought I'd share a wee story from that part of the world. The story was collected by a woman called Leclaire Gowans Alger, but she had a wee pseudonym, a Gaelic pseudonym, Scorich Nich Lewis. I hope I pronounced that right, but I've got a few of her books, and she was actually from America and collected stories, traditional Scottish tales, and was a librarian, and she wrote under her pseudonym. And that's what stories are like for me, is that they kind of take you on a journey, they allow you to be someone else, and you can enter into the story. And as I've been sitting in my garden, I have literally been travelling around my favourite places of Scotland, and the stories associated with them kind of peg your imagination in certain places. And for me, this story is in the west coast. If I take you a bit further north, from the wee town of Prestonpans, beyond Stirling, past the Highland line, over Rannoch Moor and through Glencoe, up the Great Glen, to the fringes of Loch Ness, then turn west and continue until you get to the beautiful, beautiful Loch Duach. I imagine this story taking place somewhere in that region, surrounded by the mountains of the west coast of Scotland. Now, this was the land, and to some extent still is, of crofting. And there were two crofts. One croft was owned by a man called Rab McCrae, and the other croft was owned by Jamie McNab. And the two crofts, the end of the two crofts, met and bordered each other. And where the border was, there was a large, large stone, a boulder. One of these great erratics that had been placed in the landscape by the giants in times gone past, or if you believe the geologists, glaciers. But this boulder, a boundary stone as it became known, separated the two crofts of Jamie and Rab. And in fact, half of the boulder was on one croft and half of the boulder was on the other croft. It literally marked the division between the two crofts. And Rab and Jamie, well, they, after a hard day's work, looking after the livestock and tending to the crops and doing all the other things that they needed to do in the crop, very often they would retire in the evening of the day to the boundary stone, and there they would sit on the stone and talk about their day and put the world to rights, and sometimes just sit and be together. They were very close friends as well as being neighbours. Well, eventually, as the years went by, they grew into old men and they died. They passed away to the next life, and very close to each other, and they were laid to rest in the churchyard just over the hill, where no doubt they continued their conversations. And their sons took over the crofts, and like their fathers before them, the sons worked together and were friends, and at the end of the evening would often meet for a social exchange at the boundary stone. And like their fathers, they grew in friendship together as they grew old, and they too passed away and were buried in the churchyard just over the hill, close to their fathers. They both had two sons as well, and those sons were named in honour of their grandparents. And so you had young Rab and young Jamie, and like their fathers and their grandfathers, they too worked the crofts. And as it was now a tradition, they would often meet at the boundary stone for a wee reflection of the day, talking about, the matters of the day and news. And so it seemed things would continue until one day something happened. It was old Sandy who was walking by one day. Now, he was a real elder of the village. He was in his 90s. He had a long memory of many, many things. People would often come to him for advice about things from the past, and he was very proud of his memory. And as he was walking by, he saw in his croft Jamie McNabb working. And then he had a look at the boundary stone, and he called Jamie over to him and he said, Jamie, I've been looking at the boundary stone. And he said, you know me, I have a very long memory, but I am sure in the old days that boundary stone was 20 feet closer to the burn than it is now. It looks like it's been moved. It looks like the young Rab has tried to rob you of 20 feet of your croft. No, said Jamie, it's where it's always been. Oh, no, I don't think so. Well, old Sandy went walking on his way, but leaving this thought. So Jamie looked at it and he thought, maybe he's right. Aye, I think he's right actually, now he says it. I'm sure in the old days it used to be closer to the burn. That Rab is trying to steal me of 20 feet of my croft, and he thought I wouldn't notice. Well, I'll teach him. So off Jamie went and got his ox, and he pulled the boundary stone 20 feet, giving him the extra 20 feet that he believed he'd been robbed of. Well, sometime later, you can imagine, Rab McCrae came along and had a look and immediately noticed that the boundary stone had been moved, and he called over to his friend and said, Oi, come here, Jamie, what you doing? Why have you moved the stone? Don't take me for a fool, he said. You've tried to rob me of 20 feet of land. Oh, don't be foolish, man. It's I been in that original position. Argue as they may, Jamie would not change his mind or took the stone back. Rab was fuming. He went back to his wife and he told his wife what had happened, and she tried to settle him down, but he was really, really angry. He's trying to steal 20 feet of my land. And so off he went and he got his ox and he moved the boundary stone back to the position it was originally. Now the next day, can you guess what happened? Jamie came out and he saw the stone had been put back into its original position. He said, no having that. And got his ox and pulled it back another 20 feet once again. Now, this began a process in which the stone was moved backwards and forwards 20 feet. On Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays it was moved in one direction. On Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays it was moved in the other direction. The only time the boundary stone wasn't moved, of course, was the Sabbath, where both young men would sit in the church and listen to the minister talking about the importance of loving thy neighbour as they scowled at each other. Well, soon the whole dispute became an affair of the entire village. People started to take sides, the McCrae side and the McNabb side. People started to argue about who was right and who was wrong. People also started to take bets as to who was going to be the ultimate winner. Who would be the one to give up first? For every day, apart from the Sabbath, the stone was being moved 20 feet this way and 20 feet that way. Well, after a number of weeks, finally, young Rab decided he'd had enough. Oh, he said, I can't be bothered with this anymore. If that Jamie wants to take 20 feet of my croft, then fine. It's not the most fertile part of the croft anyway. It's just a shame that he's spoilt this friendship. I'm not going to move the stone anymore. I've got better things to do. Well, this information, of course, came to the young Jamie, and the young Jamie thought, we will see if he keeps his word. The next morning, when Jamie looked out the window, I knew it, he said to himself. Look, Rab has moved the stone, despite the fact he said he wouldn't. And so Jamie pulled the stone back the next 20 feet. The following day it was back up again, and so Jamie pulled it back down the next 20 feet. And then them two men met later in the tavern. Och, I thought you said that you weren't going to move the stone, Rab, but you are. Rab looked at Jamie and said, what are you talking about? I haven't touched the stone for a whole week. Aye, you have, said Jamie. Every time I move it, it's back in its other position. I'm not going to give up, you know. And Rab said, I don't know what you're talking about. You can just leave it. I've had enough of this argument. And just then, old Sandy burst into the tavern. You've got to come and see. You've got to come and see. Everyone turned round to him. In all my years, I've never seen anything like this. What is it? Asked Rab and Jamie and everyone else in the tavern. The boundary stone. What about the boundary stone? It's walking. It's walking. Aye. It's walking on its own legs. Come on. Well, everyone had to see this. And so Rab and Jamie ran out the tavern along with half the other village who'd been in the tavern. And when they got to the edge of their crofts, sure enough, there was the boundary stone, walking. It had 8 legs. It was like a giant spider gradually crawling along the field until it finally settled into the original position it had been in. Nobody could believe what they were watching, and then from the stone emerged 4 ghostly figures. The stone itself hadn't been walking. The stone was being carried by the 4 ghosts that lay in the churchyard. The fathers and grandfathers of young Jamie and young Rab. And they came up to the young men, and the ghost of young Jamie McNabb's grandfather peered at him and said, "Leave the stone where it was. It was in the right position in the first place. That old Sandy, well, he forgot about the storm many years ago that moved the position of the burn. Now can all 4 of us now please rest in peace?" And the 4 ghosts then walked off to the churchyard in friendship as they had always been in life, chatting and talking. Well, that was the end of the trouble, of course. The boundary stone stayed there and is still there. Perhaps the main loser in this, in the end, was old Sandy, who had kind of forgotten about the storm. Or perhaps old Sandy was in fact the only one who had remembered the storm. And he just enjoyed the drama that he'd created. The truth of it, we will never know.